The transport ship's engines went quiet as it docked with Stellar Station Academy. Through the small windows, Alex Rivera could see the massive structure floating in space like a giant metal flower. Its arms stretched out in all directions, each one bigger than any city he had ever seen on Mars. Lights blinked along its surface like stars, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. "This is it," Sam Thompson said from the seat next to him. She pressed her face against the window, her breath making fog on the glass. "The best military academy in the galaxy." Dr. Reese Williams looked up from her medical textbook. "And they let us in," she said with a small smile. 3 humans from the edge of nowhere. The other passengers on the transport were already standing up and gathering their things. Alex could see them clearly now, beings he had only read about in books. The Keth looked like walking crystals that caught the light and threw rainbows on the walls. The more moved like they were swimming through air, their skin changing colors as they talked to each other in clicks and whistles. The hive minds moved together in perfect groups, never bumping into each other, never making a sound. None of them looked at the 3 humans. "Remember what they told us in training," Reese whispered as they stood up. "Keep quiet, stay together, and don't give them any reason to kick us out." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Cool, clean air flowed in, carrying smells that Alex couldn't name. They walked through a tunnel that curved gently upward, following the stream of other new cadets. The walls were smooth white metal with lines of blue light running along them like veins. Then they reached the security checkpoint. The scanner was a tall arch that hummed quietly as each cadet walked through it. Alex watched as a Keth stepped into it. The scanner glowed soft blue and made a pleasant chime. "Keth origin detected. Welcome to Stellar Station Academy." A group of more went through next. The scanner turned green. "More origin detected. Welcome to Stellar Station Academy." The hive minds caused the scanner to pulse with white light. "Collective origin detected. Welcome to Stellar Station Academy." Then it was their turn. Alex went first. The moment he stepped into the arch, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed on and off. The scanner's voice was loud and sharp. "Warning, Earth origin detected. Use extreme caution, Death World species." Every head in the area turned to look at him. The Keth made sounds like breaking glass. The Moor's skin went dark with what Alex knew meant fear or disgust. Even the hive minds stopped their perfect movements to stare. Sam and Reese got the same treatment. By the time all 3 humans had passed through, the entire reception area had gone quiet except for the scanner's repeated warnings. A security guard came over, one of the insect-like beings Alex didn't recognize. Its 4 arms moved independently as it checked a data pad. "Humans," it said in a voice that sounded like it was talking through metal. "You are Alex Rivera, Sam Thompson, and Reese Williams?" "Yes, sir," Alex said. "Follow me. You have special instructions." They were led away from the main group of cadets to a smaller desk in a corner. The being behind it had 6 eyes and fur that looked like metal wire. It didn't look up when they approached. "Earth humans," it said while typing on a keyboard with claws. "You are here because of the new Species Integration Treaty. This does not mean you belong here. This does not mean you will succeed here. Most Deathworlders wash out in the first month." It finally looked up at them with 2 of its 6 eyes while the other 4 kept working. "You will be assigned to Block 7, Level 5. That is the remedial housing section. Your equipment will be standard grade 3, sufficient for your expected performance level. Your schedule includes mandatory cultural sensitivity training and anger management classes." "Anger management?" Sam asked. "We haven't done anything wrong." All 6 eyes focused on her now. "You are from Earth. Earth produces violent species. This is a known fact throughout the galaxy. The classes are required." They were given small data pads with maps and schedules and sent on their way. The corridors of the academy were wide and clean with high ceilings and soft lighting. Everywhere they went, other cadets moved aside to let them pass, but not out of respect. They moved like people avoiding something dangerous. Block 7 was on the far edge of the station, in the oldest section. The walls were gray instead of white, and the lighting was harsher. Their rooms were small and simple: a bed, a desk, a storage unit. The equipment they were given was old but functional. Alex's engineering tools were basic models from 20 years ago. Sam's flight gear was patched and repatched. Reese's medical supplies were the kind used in emergency situations, not for learning. That evening they met in the common area of their floor. It was empty except for them. Through the windows they could see the newer sections of the academy in the distance, bright with lights and activity. I counted 17 different species today, Reese said, sitting down with a cup of something that was supposed to taste like coffee but didn't. Not one of them would look me in the eye. They're scared of us, Sam said. She was reading through the Academy handbook on her datapad. Listen to this. Earth origin species should be approached with caution due to their aggressive tendencies and unpredictable behavior patterns. Students are advised to report any concerning incidents to station security immediately. Alex looked out the window at the stars beyond the station. They think we're monsters. Maybe we are, Sam said with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe that's what it takes to survive where we come from. We're not monsters, Reese said firmly. We're just different. We come from a world that doesn't make things easy. So we learn to be tough. That's not the same thing as being evil. Try telling them that, Alex said. The next morning would bring their first classes, their first real tests, their first chances to prove what they were really made of. But tonight 3 humans sat in an empty room at the edge of space, surrounded by beings who feared them, carrying equipment that marked them as failures before they had even begun. None of them knew that the scanner's warning was more accurate than anyone realized. But not in the way the galaxy thought it meant. The first test came during breakfast. Alex sat alone at a table in the far corner of the dining hall, trying to figure out which of the colored liquids was supposed to be safe for human consumption. Around him, hundreds of alien cadets filled the massive room with sounds he was still learning to identify. Crystalline chimes from the Keth, underwater-sounding clicks from the Moor, and the strange harmony of hive-mind communication. A shadow fell across his table. Alex looked up to see 3 cadets standing there, 2 Keth whose crystal bodies caught the morning light like prisms, and something that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. "You are the Earth thing," the first Keth said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I'm Alex," he said, setting down his cup of not-quite coffee. "We need a 4th member for advanced quantum engineering," the tree being said. Its voice was deep and slow, like rocks falling. "Professor Sharpedge says all teams must have 4 members. No one else was available. The second Keth made a sound like glass breaking. "We tried to get an exception, but the rules are clear." Alex understood. They didn't want him, but they were stuck with him. "When do we start?" "Now," the first Keth said. "Follow us. Try not to break anything." The Advanced Quantum Engineering Lab was a room full of floating holographic equations and tables, covered with devices that hummed and sparkled. Professor Sharpedge was a Keth whose crystalline body was shot through with veins of gold. She looked at Alex like he was something unpleasant she had found on her shoe. "The Earth being will observe only," she announced to the class. "Its primitive neural structure cannot process advanced mathematical concepts." The lesson was about quantum field manipulation, how to bend space and time to create faster-than-light communication. Alex's teammates worked with ease, their crystal hands moving through holographic equations like they were dancing. The tree being, whose name was Rootsinger, shaped energy fields by humming low notes that made Alex's bones vibrate. Alex watched and tried to understand. The math was unlike anything he had learned on Earth or Mars. Instead of numbers, they used crystalline structures that grew and changed shape. Instead of equations, they created patterns that looked like living things. But as he watched, Alex began to see something his teammates missed. The elegant crystal math was beautiful, but it was also inefficient. It took enormous amounts of energy to create small effects. The patterns were complex, but they were fragile. One small change could make the whole structure collapse. "The field generator is overloading," he said quietly. His Keth teammates ignored him. The tree being might not have heard him at all. On the table in front of them, a device that looked like a metal flower was starting to glow red around the edges. "The containment matrix is unstable," Alex said, louder this time. Professor Sharpedge turned one of her gold-veined facets toward him. "The Earth being will remain silent. Its input is not required." The device started smoking. Alex could see the problem clearly now. The crystal math was trying to force the energy into a perfect pattern, but quantum fields didn't want to be perfect. They wanted to be messy and unpredictable, like everything else in the universe. "It's going to explode," Alex said, standing up. The professor made a sound like breaking bells. "Impossible. The calculations aren't." The device exploded. Not a big explosion, but enough to fill the room with smoke and set off every alarm in the building. Students scattered in all directions, their various forms of communication rising to panic levels. Alex walked through the smoke to where the device had been. The table was scorched black, but the housing was still intact. "He could fix this, what are you doing?" Rootsinger asked, his tree voice shaking with concern. Alex was already working, using his basic tools to open the device's housing. Inside, he could see the problem. The quantum field generator was designed like a perfect crystal, but it needed to be designed like a living thing. Something that could bend and adapt instead of breaking under pressure. He started rewiring connections, not following the elegant patterns the Keth preferred, but creating something that looked more like a spider web, messy but flexible, strong in ways that mattered more than beauty. "Stop," Professor Sharpedge said, her voice cutting through the smoke. "You are contaminating the device with primitive techniques." "I'm fixing it," Alex said without looking up. His fingers were working fast now, connecting circuits in ways that probably looked crazy to crystal-based minds. "Your math is perfect, but perfect doesn't work in the real world." "The real world follows mathematical laws," the professor said. "No," Alex said, making the last connection and stepping back. "Math follows the real world, and the real world is messy." He activated the device. Instead of the smooth, perfect hum it had made before, it now made a sound like a living thing breathing. The holographic display showed quantum fields that twisted and curved in patterns that looked almost organic, but it worked. The field was stable, efficient, and producing twice the output with half the energy. The room went silent except for the device's gentle breathing sound. Professor Sharpedge approached the table slowly, her gold veins pulsing with light as she examined the readings. "This is irregular." "It's effective," Alex said. "The approach is crude, but it works." She studied the data for a long moment. Around them, other students were gathering to look at the unusual device. "The Earth being will continue with the team," she finally said. "For observation purposes only." That afternoon, Alex found Sam in the flight simulator bay, arguing with an instructor who looked like a blue-scaled snake with arms. The simulator pods were arranged in rows, each one designed to accommodate different body types and sensory systems. "The human cannot use this equipment," the instructor was saying, its forked tongue flicking out with each word. "Its reaction time is too slow for modern combat scenarios." "Let me try," Sam said. She was wearing a flight suit that was too big for her, with gloves that were meant for hands with more fingers. "It would be a waste of resources," the instructor said. "Perhaps ground-based logistics would be more suitable for your species." Alex watched as Sam's expression changed. He had seen that look before, usually right before she did something that would either be brilliant or get them all in trouble. "One simulation," she said. "If I fail, I'll transfer to logistics without argument." The instructor's scales changed color slightly. What Alex had learned was the equivalent of a shrug. "Very well. You may embarrass yourself if you wish." Sam climbed into the simulator pod. It was designed for more physiology, so she had to wedge herself into a space meant for a being with different proportions. The controls were arranged for hands that could move independently in 3 dimensions, while human hands were limited to more basic movements. The simulation started. On the screens around the room, everyone could see what Sam was experiencing, a complex combat scenario with enemy fighters attacking from multiple directions while she tried to protect a convoy of transport ships. The other cadets in the room began making sounds that Alex recognized as laughter. Sam's ship moved erratically, spinning and diving in patterns that looked random and desperate. She was clearly struggling with the alien controls, overcompensating for the differences in reaction time and spatial perception. Then something changed. Instead of fighting the controls, Sam started working with them. Her movements became smoother, more natural. She stopped trying to fly the ship like a human and started flying it like something else entirely. Her ship began moving in ways that made the other cadets stop laughing. She was using the 3-dimensional nature of space combat in ways that the simulator's programmers hadn't expected. While the enemy fighters moved in predictable patterns, Sam's ship twisted through space like a living thing, always where the enemy didn't expect it to be. One by one, enemy fighters began exploding on the screen. The room grew quiet as Sam continued the simulation. She wasn't just surviving the scenario, she was dominating it. Her ship danced between laser blasts, struck at impossible angles. and protected the convoy with a style of flying that was completely unlike anything in the Academy's textbooks. When the simulation ended, the final score appeared on the screen. Perfect completion. 0 friendly casualties. New Academy record. The instructor stared at the screen for a long moment, its scales shifting through several different colors. "This is highly irregular, but effective," Sam said, climbing out of the pod with a grin. That evening, Alex and Sam found Reese in the medical bay, practicing with equipment that looked like it had been built for entirely different species. The medical instruments were designed for beings with different numbers of hands, different types of senses, and different ideas about how healing should work. "How was your first day?" Alex asked. Reese held up a device that looked like a crystal wand. "I'm supposed to use this to heal cuts by realigning the patient's energy fields. Does it work?" "On some species, maybe, but not on everything." She put the wand down and picked up a small kit of human-made instruments. "Good thing I brought my own supplies." The medical instructor appeared behind them, a being that looked like it was made of liquid light held in a roughly humanoid shape. The Earth being should not be using primitive tools in a modern medical facility. "They work," Reese said simply. "Energy healing is more sophisticated than crude physical intervention." "But what if energy healing doesn't work?" Reese asked. "What if the patient's injury is too severe, or their species doesn't respond to energy manipulation?" The instructor flickered slightly. "Such situations are rare, but they happen, occasionally. Then shouldn't we be prepared for them?" Before the instructor could answer, alarms started going off throughout the medical bay. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and a voice echoed through the corridors. "Medical emergency in Training Bay 7. All available personnel respond immediately." The instructor flowed toward the exit, moving faster than Alex thought possible. Reese grabbed her kit and followed, with Alex and Sam close behind. Training Bay 7 was in chaos when they arrived. A group of cadets had been practicing zero-gravity combat maneuvers when something went wrong. 3 of them were floating unconscious in the center of the bay, while others tried to reach them using emergency thrusters. "Energy trauma," the instructor said after scanning the victims with a crystalline device. "Their life force has been disrupted by the zero-gravity field generators." The other medical students began setting up energy healing equipment, devices that glowed and hummed and projected patterns of light. But after several minutes of treatment, the unconscious cadets showed no improvement. "The disruption is too severe," the instructor admitted. "We need to get them to the main medical facility." "There isn't time," Reese said, studying the readouts. "Look at their life signs. They're failing too fast." She pushed forward through the crowd of medical students and began examining the victims with her human instruments. While the others worked with energy and light, she used simple tools to check pulse, breathing, and reflexes. "They're not energy disrupted," she said after a moment. "They're in shock from decompression. Their bodies can't adjust to the pressure changes fast enough." "Impossible," the instructor said. "The readings clearly show no." "Your readings show what you expect to see," Reese interrupted. She was already working on the first victim, using techniques that looked primitive compared to the glowing devices around her. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Alex and Sam watched as Reese worked with her hands and basic instruments, treating symptoms instead of energy patterns, focusing on the body as a physical system instead of a mystical one. One by one, the unconscious cadets began to recover. By the time it was over, 3 lives had been saved using methods that the Academy considered obsolete. The instructor flickered in what Alex was learning to recognize as confusion. "Your techniques are effective. They're tools," Reese said, cleaning her instruments. "Different tools for different problems. Energy healing is wonderful when it works, but when it doesn't, you need something else." As they walked back to their quarters that night, Alex thought about the day's events. 3 humans, 3 different challenges, 3 different ways of proving that what the galaxy considered primitive might actually be useful. "They're going to have to take us seriously now," Sam said. "Some of them will," Reese said. "Others will just try harder to prove we don't belong." Alex looked out at the stars through the corridor windows. Somewhere out there was Earth, the world that had made them tough enough to survive in places where elegant solutions failed. The world that had taught them that sometimes the crude approach was the right approach. "Let them try," he said. The summons came 3 weeks later, delivered by a mechanical drone that hovered outside their door like an angry metal bee. Alex opened the message while Sam and Reese looked over his shoulder. Special Survival Assessment, Alex read aloud. All Earth Origin cadets report to Launch Bay 12 immediately. That doesn't sound good, Sam said. They found Launch Bay 12 buzzing with activity. Ships were being loaded with supplies while technicians ran final checks on equipment. In the center of it all stood Commandant Crystalsong, her crystalline body reflecting the bay's lights in sharp angles that somehow managed to look disapproving. Earth humans, she said as they approached. Your recent performances have raised questions about our assessment methods. Some instructors believe you may possess capabilities that our initial evaluations failed to detect, Alex. Didn't like the way she said capabilities, like it was a disease they might be carrying. Therefore, Crystalsong continued, you will undergo a comprehensive survival assessment on planet Kresh 9. It is a moderately challenging environment that will test your adaptability and resource management skills. A holographic display appeared showing a planet that looked like a green and brown marble. Statistics scrolled past in alien script, but Alex caught enough familiar symbols to understand the basics. Gravity 3 times Earth normal, atmospheric composition borderline toxic to most species, native fauna classified as aggressive. Other cadet teams have successfully completed this assessment with proper equipment and support, the Commandant said. You will have the same resources available to them. She gestured to a pile of equipment nearby, environmental suits, food supplies, communication gear, and various tools that looked advanced but unfamiliar. The assessment period is 7 standard days, Crystalsong said. A rescue beacon is included in your supplies for emergency evacuation. Try not to embarrass yourselves. An hour later, they were strapped into a small transport ship heading toward the planet's surface. Through the viewports, Alex could see Kresh 9 growing larger, a world covered in dense forests and jagged mountains, with storms swirling across its surface like angry fists. Moderately challenging, Sam said, reading through the equipment manual. Listen to this. Recommended for species with enhanced physical capabilities and advanced technological integration. What does that mean? Reese asked. It means, Alex said, studying the atmospheric readings, that normal people need powered armor and life support just to breathe down there. The transport ship shuddered as it hit the planet's atmosphere. Outside, the sky turned orange with atmospheric friction, then green as they dropped through the cloud layer. The landscape below looked like something from a nightmare. Twisted trees that moved without wind, rivers that ran uphill, and mountains that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Their landing site was a clearing surrounded by forest. The moment the transport's ramp opened, Alex felt the planet's gravity trying to crush him into the ground. Each breath required conscious effort. The air was thick and humid, with an aftertaste of metal and sulfur. Environmental suits, Sam said, reaching for the equipment pile. Alex tried to activate his suit's life support system. Nothing happened. He checked the power cells. They were charged, but the suit's systems weren't responding to human neural patterns. Mine's not working either, Reese said. Same here, Sam confirmed. They're designed for different nervous systems. The transport ship was already lifting off, leaving them alone with a pile of useless equipment on a world that wanted to kill them. Alex looked around at the forest pressing in from all sides. In the distance, something howled, a sound that was answered by a dozen others from different directions. So, he said, Plan B. Plan B turned out to be surviving like humans had always survived, by being too stubborn to die and too clever to give up. The first challenge was shelter. The environmental suits were useless, but their materials weren't. Alex stripped them down to basic components while Sam scouted the immediate area, and Reese tested local water sources with her medical kit. The good news is that the water is drinkable if we boil it, Reese reported. The bad news is that everything else on this planet seems to want to eat us. She pointed to a set of tracks in the mud near the river, something with too many feet and claws, the size of kitchen knives. Alex was building their shelter using suit materials and local wood. The gravity made every movement exhausting, but it also meant that anything they built would be incredibly stable. He designed the structure like a fortress, low and strong, with walls thick enough to stop whatever was making those tracks. Fire, Sam said, returning from her scouting trip with an armload of wood. We need fire for warmth, cooking, and keeping the local wildlife at a distance. The planet's high humidity made starting a fire difficult, but Alex rigged an electrical starter from the broken equipment. Soon they had a small blaze going, and the sounds from the forest seemed to move further away. The first night was the hardest. The planet's rotation was different from Earth's, making the night nearly 14 hours long. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Roars, screams, and things that might have been singing if they came from anything remotely human. Around midnight, something large crashed through the trees nearby. Alex peered through a gap in their shelter's walls and saw eyes reflecting the firelight. Lots of eyes, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. "Don't move," Reese whispered. "Don't even breathe loudly." The creatures circled their shelter for what felt like hours, occasionally making sounds like breaking glass mixed with grinding metal. Alex could smell it through the walls, something like rotting meat and ozone. Finally, it moved away, leaving only the memory of those impossible eyes and the sound of claws scraping against stone. "Well," Sam said when it was quiet again, "that was fun." The next few days fell into a rhythm. They spent their mornings improving their shelter and gathering supplies, their afternoons exploring the immediate area and mapping safe routes, and their evenings planning for the challenges ahead. Alex discovered that the planet's plants were more useful than they first appeared. Some produced fibers strong enough to weave into rope. Others had leaves that burned hot and clean when dried properly. A few even had fruit that was edible once you learned to recognize which ones wouldn't kill you. Sam became their hunter and scout. The planet's heavy gravity made her stronger than she had ever been on Earth, and her human endurance let her track the local animals for hours without tiring. She learned to read the forest signs, which sounds meant danger, which trails led to water, which areas the predators avoided. Reese served as their medic, botanist, and general problem solver. She cataloged everything they ate, tested every new plant they encountered, and treated the inevitable cuts and bruises that came from living in a hostile environment. More importantly, she helped them stay mentally healthy when the constant stress threatened to break them down. On the fourth day, they encountered their first major predator. Alex was gathering materials near the river when he heard Sam shout a warning. He looked up to see something that looked like a cross between a bear and a spider, charging toward him through the trees. It was easily twice his size, with claws that could tear through metal and enough legs to keep running, even if he managed to hurt some of them. There was no time to run, and nowhere to go anyway. Alex grabbed the nearest weapon he could find, a spear he had made from a broken equipment housing and a sharp piece of stone, and planted himself between the creature and their shelter. The impact nearly broke every bone in his body. The creature's momentum carried them both into the river, where they thrashed and fought in water that came up to Alex's chest. The beast was stronger, faster, and better adapted to the environment. But Alex had something it didn't: the ability to think strategically even while being torn apart. He managed to work the spear between two of its leg joints, using the river bottom as leverage to drive the point deep. The creature screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and tried to shake him loose, but Alex held on. Sam arrived with a club made from twisted tree branches and started hitting the beast anywhere she could reach. Reese appeared with a makeshift sling, throwing stones with surprising accuracy at its eyes and joints. It took all three of them working together, but they finally brought the creature down. When it was over, they sat in the bloody water, breathing hard and trying to process what had just happened. "We killed it," Sam said, almost in disbelief. "We survived," Reese corrected. "That's what matters." Alex looked down at the dead creature. Its claws were longer than his fingers, its teeth could have crushed his skull, and it had been perfectly adapted for life on this nightmare world. But they had beaten it using nothing but primitive weapons, teamwork, and the kind of desperate determination that only came from species that had evolved on worlds where everything was trying to kill them. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said. "What?" Reese asked. "They called this moderately challenging." The rest of the assessment period passed more easily. Word somehow spread through the local ecosystem that the small bipeds near the river were more dangerous than they looked. The predators gave them a wider berth, and the scavengers learned to stay away from their shelter. Alex built them a better camp using techniques his grandfather had taught him for surviving on Mars during the early colonial days. Sam mapped the entire river valley and established safe routes to several resource sites. Reese created a detailed guide to the local flora and fauna, including notes on what was edible, what was useful, and what would try to kill you. By the end of 7 days, they weren't just surviving on Creche 9, they were thriving. The rescue ship arrived right on schedule, piloted by the same snake-like instructor who had doubted Sam's flying abilities. He stared through the viewports at their camp in obvious confusion. "Where is your emergency beacon?" he asked as they loaded their gear. "We didn't need it," Alex said. "The environmental suits? They didn't work with human biology," Reese explained. "We improvised." The instructor's scales shifted through several colors as he processed this information. "You survived 7 days on Creche 9 without technological assistance?" "We survived," Sam said, "because we didn't need technological assistance." As their ship lifted off from the planet's surface, Alex looked down at the forest that had been their home for a week. It still looked like a nightmare world, hostile and alien and utterly unfit for civilized life, but they had made it work. They had taken a planet that was supposed to break them and turned it into something they could not just endure, but master. "Think they'll be impressed?" Sam asked. Alex watched Creche 9 shrink to a green dot against the stars. "I think they're going to be terrified." Back at the academy, news of their survival spread quickly through the corridors and common areas. 3 humans had not only survived the Creche 9 assessment, but had done it without the advanced equipment that other species considered essential. Some cadets looked at them with new respect. Others whispered among themselves in languages Alex couldn't understand, but their tone made their meaning clear. Crystal Song called them to her office the day after their return. She stood behind her desk like a pillar of living light, her faceted surface reflecting their images in fractured pieces. "Your performance on Creche 9 has created complications," she said. "We completed the assessment," Alex pointed out. "You exceeded it, significantly." Her voice carried notes of confusion and something that might have been concern. "Other cadets are asking questions about why Earth humans were assigned to remedial housing and given outdated equipment." "Good questions," Sam said. "Potentially disruptive questions." Crystal Song moved to the window, looking out at the Academy's training areas where hundreds of cadets practiced their various specialties. "The galactic educational system is built on certain assumptions about species' capabilities and limitations." "Maybe those assumptions are wrong," Reese said. The Commandant turned back to them, her crystalline form catching the light in sharp, angular patterns. "Perhaps, or perhaps Earth humans are simply unpredictable variables that require special consideration." She paused, and in that silence Alex heard something he hadn't expected: uncertainty. For the first time since they had arrived, one of the Academy's leaders wasn't completely sure what to do with them. "You will continue your training," Crystal Song finally said, "but you will be monitored closely. The galaxy has certain expectations about Death World species, and deviation from those expectations can be problematic." As they left her office, Alex thought about what she had really said. They were supposed to be dangerous, but in predictable ways. They were supposed to be primitive, but not too capable. They were supposed to fail, but not too spectacularly. The problem was that humans had never been very good at meeting other people's expectations. "What do you think happens next?" Reese asked as they walked back to their quarters. "I think," Alex said, watching other cadets move aside as they passed, "things are about to get interesting." The change started small, like ripples spreading across still water. It began when Rootsinger, the tree-like being from Alex's engineering team, approached their table during breakfast. His slow, deliberate movements caught the attention of nearby tables, and conversations quieted as other cadets watched to see what would happen. "Alex Human," Rootsinger said in his deep, rumbling voice, "I have studied your modifications to the quantum field generator." Alex looked up from his meal, aware that dozens of alien eyes were focused on them. "And? Your approach lacks elegance," Rootsinger said. Several Keth at nearby tables made sounds like wind chimes in agreement, but it achieved superior results with lower energy requirements. He paused, his bark-like skin shifting color slightly. "I would like to learn this technique." The dining hall went completely silent. A member of the Sylvan Collective, one of the galaxy's most advanced technological species, was asking to learn from a human. "Sure," Alex said, as if beings from ancient tree civilizations asked him for engineering advice every day. We can work on it this afternoon. The ripples spread faster after that. Sam found herself with a waiting list of cadets who wanted to learn her irregular flying techniques. Apparently, setting a new academy record had convinced several of them that human piloting methods might be worth understanding, even if they didn't look like anything in the textbooks. Reese was recruited to teach a seminar on primitive medical intervention. After word spread that her techniques could handle trauma cases that energy healing couldn't touch, the medical faculty wasn't entirely happy about it. But they couldn't argue with her results. Not everyone was pleased with this development. "This is intolerable," Deep Current said, his morphysiology allowing him to speak while submerged in the aquatic study pool where several cadets were gathered. His skin flashed angry red patterns as he spoke. "These Earth primitives are corrupting proper academic standards." Alex, Sam, and Reese were sitting at a table on the pool's edge, working on a joint project that combined engineering, piloting, and medical applications. Around them, their new study partners, a mix of species that would never have worked together before, were collaborating on problems that required different types of thinking. They're teaching crude approximations instead of elegant solutions, Deep Current continued, his voice carrying clearly across the water. "Their methods have no theoretical foundation." "But they work," said Flow Pattern, another Moor whose skin showed more neutral colors. "The human Sam's piloting techniques increased my simulation scores by 30%. "Because they're reckless and unpredictable," Deep Current replied. "Qualities that have no place in civilized society." Alex tried to ignore the conversation and focus on his work, but Deep Current's voice was getting louder, drawing attention from cadets throughout the study area. "The Earth beings should be restricted to their own kind," Deep Current declared, "before their violent tendencies corrupt more promising students." That was enough. Alex stood up, feeling the familiar weight of alien stares as he walked to the edge of the pool. Deep Current was floating near the center, surrounded by a group of like-minded cadets who clearly agreed with his position. "You have something to say to me. Say it directly," Alex said. Deep Current's skin flashed through several colors before settling on a pattern that Alex had learned meant aggressive confidence. "Very well, Earth Primitive. Your crude methods may impress some of the weaker students, but they prove nothing except your species' inability to grasp sophisticated concepts." "My crude methods work," Alex replied. "Your sophisticated concepts failed. In isolated cases, perhaps. But could they work under real pressure? In situations that require true skill rather than random luck?" Alex could feel the tension building in the room. Other conversations had stopped, and cadets were gathering around the pool to watch the confrontation. Sam and Reese had moved to flank him, a gesture that wasn't lost on anyone present. "What do you have in mind?" Alex asked. Deep Current smiled, an expression that looked unsettling on more features. "A formal challenge. Individual combat in the aquatic environment, using traditional Moor techniques. If you win, I will acknowledge that Earth methods have value. If I lose, you and your companions will confine yourselves to your assigned quarters except for mandatory classes. No more contaminating proper students with your primitive approaches." Alex looked at the water. The pool was designed for Moor physiology, beings who could breathe underwater, whose skin could process oxygen from liquid, whose bodies were built for aquatic combat. Fighting Deep Current in his natural environment would be like challenging a shark to a swimming contest. "Alex," Reese said quietly, "you don't have to do this." "Yes," he said. "I do." He started removing his outer clothing, down to the basic exercise wear that all cadets used for physical training. Around the pool, the crowd was growing larger as word spread through the Academy's communication networks. "The challenge will be observed by faculty," Deep Current announced, his skin flashing with what looked like satisfaction. "Professor Wavemaker will serve as judge." A Moor instructor appeared at the pool's edge, an elderly being whose skin showed patterns of deep blue and silver. "This is highly irregular," she said, but she didn't try to stop it. Alex lowered himself into the water. It was warm and slightly alkaline, designed to support more breathing processes. For humans, it was just water, breathable for as long as his lungs held out, but nothing more. Deep Current moved through the liquid like he had been born in it, which he probably had been. His natural swimming motions were smooth and efficient, while Alex had to work much harder just to maintain position. "Combat begins when I signal," Professor Wavemaker announced. Victory condition is opponent's submission or incapacitation. Serious injury is not permitted. Alex treaded water in the center of the pool, trying to conserve energy while deep currents circled him like a predator. The Moor cadet's skin was cycling through hunting patterns now, colors and shapes that were probably designed to confuse prey. Begin, the professor said. Deep current struck immediately, moving through the water with speed that Alex couldn't match. But Alex had one advantage that the Moor cadet wasn't expecting. Humans had been persistence hunters on Earth, creatures who won through endurance and strategy rather than speed and power. Instead of trying to match deep current's aquatic agility, Alex did something else entirely. He let himself sink to the bottom of the pool and waited. Deep current followed him down, probably expecting to find an opponent who was struggling with the underwater environment. Instead, he found Alex sitting cross-legged on the pool floor, looking perfectly comfortable despite being 12 feet underwater. The confusion cost Deep Current his initiative. Alex moved then, not with the graceful swimming motions that Moor combat required, but with the brutal efficiency of human ground fighting adapted for underwater use. He grabbed Deep Current's ankle and used it as leverage to propel himself upward, driving his shoulder into the Moor's center of mass. In water, the impact was different than it would have been on land, but the principle was the same. Disrupt your opponent's balance and control the engagement. Deep Current tried to break free using traditional Moor grappling techniques, but those techniques were designed for fighting other Moor. Alex's human anatomy was different enough that the standard holds and throws didn't work the way they should. Meanwhile, Alex was using every dirty trick he had learned growing up on Mars, where the low gravity made traditional martial arts useless, and survival often came down to who could be more creative with the available physics. The fight moved throughout the pool, sometimes on the surface, sometimes on the bottom, always with Alex doing things that Deep Current's training hadn't prepared him for. Human fighting techniques looked chaotic and unpredictable compared to the elegant combat forms that galactic civilization preferred, but they were effective in ways that elegance couldn't match. In the end, it came down to endurance. Deep Current was faster, stronger, and perfectly adapted for aquatic combat. But Alex could hold his breath longer, recover from impacts faster, and keep fighting when exhaustion should have stopped him. When Deep Current finally submitted, they were both floating near the surface of the pool, breathing hard and bleeding from various small cuts and bruises. The crowd around the pool was completely silent, staring at the impossible sight of a human who had just defeated a Moor in aquatic combat. The challenge is concluded, Professor Wavemaker announced. Victory to the Earth-human Alex. Alex pulled himself out of the pool, water streaming from his clothes and hair. Deep Current floated in the center, his skin showing patterns of defeat and exhaustion. Your techniques are primitive, Deep Current said quietly, his voice barely carrying to the pool's edge. But effective, Alex replied, wrapping himself in a towel that Reese handed him. Deep Current's skin flickered through several color patterns before settling on something Alex had never seen before. A complex design that might have been respect, or acknowledgement, or simple confusion. How did you do that? Asked Flow Pattern, who had been watching from the pool's edge. I didn't fight like a Moor, Alex said, still catching his breath. I fought like a human. Word of the challenge spread through the academy faster than light-speed communication. Within hours, everyone knew that a human had defeated one of the senior Moor cadets in single combat. Using techniques that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. The reaction was mixed. Some cadets were impressed, others were concerned, and a few seemed genuinely frightened by what they had witnessed. But the most important reaction came from an unexpected source. Impressive, said a voice behind them as they walked back to their quarters that evening. They turned to see a cadet they didn't recognize, something that looked like living metal shaped into humanoid form, with surfaces that shifted between mirror-bright and matte black. I am Steelmind, the being said, his voice sounding like precision machinery. I represent the mechanical collective. Congratulations, Sam said. Is there something we can help you with? Perhaps. My people are interested in your approaches to problem solving. We have observed your methods in engineering, piloting, and now combat. You consistently achieve results that our calculations suggest should be impossible. Steelmind's surface shifted to a more reflective state, throwing back distorted images of their faces. We would like to understand how. It's not complicated, Reese said. We do what works, not what looks good. But how do you determine what works without extensive theoretical analysis? Alex thought about how to explain it. We try things. If they work, we keep doing them. If they don't, we try something else. That is remarkably inefficient. Maybe, but it's fast and it adapts to changing conditions. Steelmind was quiet for a moment, his surfaces shifting through various patterns. My people are builders. We create structures that last for millennia, systems that operate without failure for geological ages. But we have noticed that such systems sometimes fail when faced with problems their designers never anticipated. That's the difference, Alex said. We don't try to anticipate every problem. We just build things that can handle whatever comes up. Even if it means using crude materials and inelegant solutions, especially then. Steelmind's form shifted again, becoming more angular and sharp-edged. The Mechanical Collective would like to propose a collaboration. We provide technical knowledge and manufacturing capabilities. You provide adaptability. It was the first formal alliance offer they had received from any of the galactic species, a sign that some parts of the galaxy were beginning to see humans not as primitive annoyances, but as partners who brought something valuable to the table. We'll consider it, Alex said. As they continued to their quarters, Sam spoke up. Things are really changing, aren't they? Some things, Reese agreed, but not everyone is happy about it. She was right. As they passed through the corridors, Alex could see the division that was forming among the cadet population. Some species were beginning to work with humans, drawn by their practical effectiveness. Others were becoming more hostile, seeing human success as a threat to the established order. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Alex said. Maybe, Sam said, but at least now they know we're not going anywhere. That night, as Alex lay in his narrow bed in the remedial housing block, he thought about everything that had changed since their arrival. They were no longer the joke cadets that everyone expected to wash out. They weren't being ignored or dismissed as primitive curiosities, but they also weren't safe. Success had made them visible, and visibility brought its own dangers. Outside his window, the stars looked the same as they always had, distant points of light in an infinite darkness. But now those stars represented something different than they had when he first arrived. They were no longer the lights of a galaxy that had no place for humans. They were the lights of a galaxy that was just beginning to understand what humans were capable of. Whether that understanding would lead to acceptance or conflict remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be able to go back to simply ignoring Earth's children. The ripples had become waves, and waves, Alex knew, had a tendency to reshape whatever shores they reached. Alex was deep in the engineering bay's quantum mechanics when the siren started wailing. Not the soft chimes that announced class changes or mealtimes, but the harsh, urgent wail that meant something had gone seriously wrong. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as cadets emerged from classrooms and dormitories, their various forms of communication rising to a confused babble. Alex found Sam and Reese near the main communication center, where a crowd had gathered around the large display screens. What's happening? He asked. Pirate attack, Sam said, her face grim as she read the scrolling text. Passenger liner called the Star's Rest was hit near the broken chain system. 300 civilians on board. The display showed tactical information streaming in from long-range sensors. The Star's Rest was a luxury vessel that ran routes between the core worlds and the outer colonies. The kind of ship that carried families, merchants and travelers who had never imagined they might face actual violence. All available vessels are being deployed for rescue operations, the announcement continued. Senior cadets with appropriate certifications will crew support ships under faculty supervision. Alex felt his stomach drop. The Academy's training vessels weren't warships. They were lightly armed ships designed for educational purposes, equipped for learning exercises rather than real combat. Sending them against pirates was like sending children to fight wolves. Cadet assignments are being posted now, the voice continued. Report to your designated vessels immediately. The crowd pressed forward as names and ship assignments appeared on the screens. Alex scanned the lists, finding their names near the bottom. Training Vessel Swift Current, Engineering Officer Rivera, Pilot Thompson, Medical Officer Williams. At least we're together, Reese said, but her voice carried no relief. Their assigned vessel was one of the older training ships, a 50-year-old design that looked like someone had tried to make a warship, but given up halfway through. Its weapons were outdated, its armor was minimal, and its systems were the kind of reliable but basic technology that the Academy used for teaching fundamentals. Their faculty supervisor was Professor Wavemaker, the Moore instructor who had judged Alex's fight with Deep Current. She looked even less happy about the situation than they did. "This is not a training exercise," she announced as the mixed crew of cadets assembled in the ship's small briefing room. "We are responding to an actual emergency. You will follow orders precisely, and you will not attempt any heroics." The crew was a mix of species and experience levels. Besides the 3 humans, there were 2 Keth crystal singers, 3 more including Deep Current, a pair of hive minds who moved with their characteristic perfect coordination, and Steel Mind representing the mechanical collective. As they lifted off from the Academy, joining a small fleet of training vessels, Alex tried to push down the growing certainty that they were flying toward disaster. The pirates who attacked civilian ships weren't the romantic rogues from adventure stories. They were violent criminals who killed without hesitation and showed no mercy to those who couldn't fight back. The trip to the broken chain system took 6 hours at maximum warp. During the journey, they received increasingly grim updates. The Star's Rest had suffered massive damage and was losing life support. The pirates had taken control of sections of the ship and were holding passengers as hostages. Worse, long-range scans showed that the pirate force was larger than initially reported. At least 12 ships of various sizes, some of them heavily armed. "We're flying into a trap," Sam said quietly as she ran pre-flight checks on the swift current systems. "Probably," Alex agreed, working to optimize the ship's power distribution. The pirates knew this shipping lane was popular with civilian traffic. They probably planned this attack for weeks. "Then why are we doing this?" asked Crystal Harmony, one of the Keth cadets. Her crystalline body was pulsing with anxious light patterns. "Because 300 people are going to die if we don't," Reese said simply. When they dropped out of warp at the edge of the broken chain system, the situation was even worse than they had feared. The Star's Rest hung dead in space, its hull breached in multiple places and debris drifting around it like a metal cloud. The pirate ships were arranged in a defensive formation around their prize, their weapons powered and ready. "Academy vessels," came a transmission from the lead pirate ship. "Turn around and leave, or we'll add your wreckage to the debris field." Professor Wavemaker's skin flashed through several color patterns before settling on determined blue-green. "All vessels maintain formation. Begin rescue operations as planned." The plan, such as it was, called for the training vessels to approach the Star's Rest, while the pirates were supposedly distracted by negotiations. They would dock with the damaged sections and evacuate as many passengers as possible before withdrawing to a safe distance. It was a reasonable plan that assumed the pirates were rational actors who could be negotiated with. The pirates opened fire the moment the Academy ships came within weapon range. Alex felt the swift current shudder as energy blasts struck their shields. Around them, other training vessels were taking damage, their inexperienced crews struggling to handle real combat conditions. "Evasive maneuvers," Professor Wavemaker ordered, but her voice carried uncertainty. Like most Academy instructors, she was a scholar, not a warrior. Her expertise was in aquatic engineering, not space combat. Sam took control of the ship's flight systems without waiting for permission. "Hold on," she said, and threw them into a diving spiral that sent everyone not strapped down sliding across the deck. The maneuver saved their lives as a missile passed through the space they had just occupied, but it also sent them tumbling away from their assigned approach vector. "Return to formation," Wavemaker ordered. "The formation is being destroyed," Sam replied, her hands dancing across the navigation controls. "Look." On the tactical display, they could see the Academy vessels scattered across space, several already showing critical damage. The pirates were picking them off systematically, using their superior firepower and experience to devastating effect. "Training vessel Bright Hope is down," the communications officer reported. "Training vessel New Dawn has lost life support." Alex watched the disaster unfolding around them and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Academy's careful plans were collapsing under the reality of actual combat. The cadets were freezing up, overwhelmed by violence they had never been prepared for, while their instructors struggled to adapt theoretical knowledge to practical survival. "We need to do something," he said. Our orders are to maintain position and continue rescue operations, Professor Wavemaker replied, but her skin was showing the pale colors that meant fear. Our orders are getting everyone killed, Sam said bluntly. The pirates have us outgunned, outmanned, and outfought. We need to change the game. How? Steelmind asked. His metallic form had gone completely matte black, which Alex had learned meant combat readiness. Alex studied the tactical display, looking for options they might have missed. The pirates were good, better than good. They knew how to use their ships, how to coordinate their attacks, how to exploit weaknesses in their enemies' formations, but they were also predictable. They were following standard pirate tactics, the kind taught in military academies across the galaxy as examples of asymmetric warfare. They expected their opponents to follow standard responses. They're not expecting us to do anything crazy, Alex said slowly. Define crazy, Reese said. Alex pointed to the largest piece of debris floating near the star's rest, a section of hull plating that had been blasted free during the initial attack. It was roughly the size of their ship, spinning slowly as it drifted through space. We ram it into their command ship. The briefing room went silent except for the sound of weapons fire hitting their shields. That's suicide, Crystal Harmony said, her voice like breaking glass. Not if we do it right, Alex said. Sam, can you get us behind that debris without being detected? Sam studied the navigation display for a moment. Maybe. If we shut down everything except life support and use thruster-only propulsion. But Alex, even if we hit their command ship, we'll be destroyed in the explosion. Not if we abandon ship at the last second, Alex said. Reese, how long can humans survive in space with emergency suits? Maybe 10 minutes if we're lucky, Reese said. But Alex, this is insane. No, Steelmind said, his voice carrying a strange harmonic that Alex had never heard before. This is tactical innovation. The pirates will not expect a ramming attack using debris as camouflage. Their defensive systems are not configured for such a threat. Professor Wavemaker's skin was cycling through colors so rapidly that it was hard to follow. I cannot authorize a suicide mission. Then don't authorize it, Alex said. Order us to abandon ship due to critical systems failure. We'll handle the rest. You're asking me to falsify official reports. We're asking you to save 300 lives, Sam said. Around them, the battle was continuing to go badly. Another training vessel had just lost its shields and the pirates were closing in for the kill. In a few more minutes, there would be no Academy ships left to mount any kind of rescue operation. Wavemaker stared at the tactical display for a long moment, her skin showing the deep blues and purples that meant she was thinking hard about something important. All hands. Abandon ship, she announced over the comm system. Critical systems failure imminent. Repeat, all hands abandon ship immediately. The other cadets stared at her in confusion, but Alex was already moving. Sam, get us behind that debris. Reese, prep the emergency suits. Everyone else, get to the escape pods. What about the ship? Deep Current asked. The ship, Alex said. Routing control systems to the engineering station. Is about to have a very bad day. Piloted them through the debris field with the kind of precision that only came from countless hours in simulation training combined. With the reflexes of someone who had grown up in low-gravity environments, she kept them hidden behind larger pieces of wreckage, using the metal fragments as cover while they maneuvered toward their target. Alex worked frantically to rig the ship's systems for autonomous operation. The swift current would need to continue on course and execute the ramming attack, even after the crew had evacuated. It wasn't easy. The ship's computer wasn't designed for suicide runs, but human engineering had always excelled at making things work in ways their designers never intended. Escape pods are ready, Reese reported. But Alex, even if this works, how do we get rescued? We'll be floating in space in the middle of a battle. One problem at a time, Alex said, making the final connections to the autopilot system. Sam, are we in position? 30 seconds to optimal approach angle, Sam confirmed. Alex activated the ramming protocol he had just created. On the tactical display, the swift current's projected course appeared as a red line stretching from their current position to the pirate command ship. All hands to escape pods, he announced. This is really going to happen. They squeezed into the small emergency pods designed for exactly this kind of situation. Through the tiny viewports, Alex could see the pirate command ship growing larger as the swift current accelerated toward it, pushing the debris ahead of itself like a massive battering ram. The pirates noticed the incoming threat at the last possible moment. Alex saw their weapons turning toward the approaching debris, energy beams lashing out to destroy what they probably thought was just another piece of wreckage knocked loose by the battle. They were too late. The debris, pushed by the swift current's full engine power, struck the pirate command ship amidships and kept going. The explosion that followed lit up space like a small star, sending shockwaves through the entire pirate fleet. "Direct hit," Sam reported from her pod's communication system. "Their command ship is gone." But the explosion had also destroyed their own ship, leaving them floating in space in emergency pods with limited life support and no way to get home. "Now what?" Deep Current asked. Alex looked out at the battle still raging around them. The destruction of the command ship had thrown the pirates into confusion, but they still outnumbered the remaining Academy vessels. The situation was still desperate. "Now," he said, "we improvise." Floating in space inside an escape pod the size of a closet, Alex watched the battle rage around them. The destruction of the pirate command ship had bought them precious minutes, but the remaining pirate vessels were already reorganizing under a new leader. Meanwhile, the Academy training ships were scattered and damaged, their inexperienced crews barely holding together under fire. Life support shows 8 minutes remaining, Reese reported over the pod's communication system. "The nearest rescue ship is 15 minutes away," Sam added grimly. Through his pod's tiny viewport, Alex could see the Star's Rest hanging dead in space, its hull breached and bleeding atmosphere. 300 civilians were still trapped inside, waiting for a rescue that might never come. "There," Steelmine's voice crackled over the comm. "Pirate vessel approaching the passenger ship. They're preparing to board." Alex could see it too, a sleek raider moving toward the Star's Rest like a shark closing in on wounded prey. Once the pirates got aboard, the passengers would become human shields, making any rescue attempt impossible. "We have to stop them," Alex said. "With what?" Deep Current's voice carried the bitter taste of defeat. "We're floating in space in emergency pods. We have no weapons, no propulsion, no way to affect anything." Alex stared at the approaching raider, his mind racing through possibilities. The escape pods had minimal systems: life support, communications, basic positioning thrusters. Nothing that could threaten a warship, but humans had always been good at making weapons out of things that weren't supposed to be weapons. "Sam," he said, "what's our current velocity relative to the pirate ship?" "About 200 meters per second drift," she replied. "Why?" "Because we're not helpless. We're projectiles." The silence that followed told Alex that everyone understood what he was suggesting. "You want to ram the pirate ship with escape pods?" Professor Wavemaker's voice carried notes of disbelief. "Not ram," Alex corrected. "Board." He was already working with his pod's limited systems, trying to calculate trajectories and timing. "The raider has to slow down and match velocity with the Star's Rest for boarding operations. If we time it right, we can use our positioning thrusters to intercept them." "And then what?" Crystal Harmony asked. "The pods have no weapons." "We don't need weapons," Reese said, and Alex could hear the realization dawning in her voice. "We are the weapons." Alex began transmitting instructions to the other pods, showing them the intercept course he had calculated. It would require perfect timing and more luck than any reasonable person would bet on, but it was the only chance they had. "This is completely insane," Deep Current said. "Yes," Alex agreed. "That's why it might work." One by one, the other pods acknowledged his plan. Even Professor Wavemaker, after a long pause that probably involved her reconsidering every decision that had led to this moment, agreed to participate. The pirate raider was sliding alongside the Star's Rest now, extending boarding tubes to breach the passenger ship's hull. Alex could see figures moving inside the raider's bridge, probably congratulating themselves on an easy prize. "Execute on my mark," Alex said, his finger hovering over the thruster controls. 3, 2, mark. 8 escape pods fired their positioning thrusters simultaneously, accelerating from different angles toward the same target. They moved like bullets through space, too small and fast for the raider's defensive systems to track. The first pod, piloted by Steelmind, struck the raider's engine section with enough force to buckle the hull plating. The second and third pods, carrying the Hivemind pair, hit the weapon systems and communications array. Alex's pod struck the bridge section, while the others targeted critical systems throughout the ship. The impacts were devastating. Escape pods weren't designed to survive collision with warships, and they didn't. But they also weren't supposed to carry beings tough enough to walk away from crashes that should have been fatal. Alex crawled out of his pod's wreckage to find himself on the Raiders' bridge, surrounded by sparking electronics and confused pirates. The ship's crew were beings he didn't recognize, something with too many arms and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They were reaching for weapons when he tackled the nearest one. The fight that followed wasn't elegant or noble. It was the desperate violence of people who had nothing left to lose, facing enemies who showed no mercy. The pirates were better armed and knew their ship's layout, but they had never faced anything like humans in close combat. Alex fought with tools torn from the wrecked pod, using debris as weapons and the ship's own systems against its crew. Around him, he could hear similar battles raging as the other cadets took control of different sections of the Raider. Sam's voice crackled over the emergency frequency. Engine room secured. These pirates really didn't expect boarders to come from escape pods. Bridge is ours, Alex reported, looking around at the unconscious or restrained pirate crew. Reese, how are our people? Multiple injuries, but everyone's alive, came the reply. Steelmind has some damage to his outer shell, and Deep Current is bleeding, but we're functional. Alex moved to the Raiders' command console, trying to make sense of the alien control systems. The ship's computer was displaying tactical information about the ongoing battle, and what he saw made his blood run cold. While they had been fighting for control of the Raider, the remaining pirate ships had regrouped and were systematically destroying the last Academy vessels. In a few more minutes, there would be no rescue force left at all. We need to help them, he said. With what? Sam asked, arriving on the bridge covered in engine coolant and looking like she had been through a blender. This ship is barely functional after our boarding action. Alex studied the tactical display more carefully. The remaining Academy ships were trying to maintain a defensive formation while conducting rescue operations. But they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. They needed something to even the odds. The Star's Rest, he said suddenly. What about it? It's a passenger liner. It has massive cargo holds, multiple docking bays, and industrial-grade systems. If we can get it operational, Alex, Reese said, appearing in the bridge doorway with her medical kit. That ship is dead. No power, no life support, massive hull breaches. But it's big, Alex said. Big enough to ram through the entire pirate formation if we can get it moving. Steelmind materialized beside them, his metallic form showing several new dents and scratches. The passenger ship's mass is approximately 50 times that of the largest pirate vessel. A collision at sufficient velocity would be decisive. Can we get it moving? Sam asked. Alex was already studying the Raiders' sensor data on the Star's Rest. The passenger ship's main engines were offline, but its maneuvering thrusters were still functional. More importantly, its cargo holds were filled with shipping containers, mass that could be jettisoned to provide reaction thrust. We can get it moving, he said, but someone has to stay aboard to pilot it. The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. The Star's Rest was too badly damaged to survive a ramming attack. Whoever piloted it wouldn't be coming back. I'll do it, Sam said immediately. We'll all do it, Reese corrected. If this is the only way to save those people, then that's what we do. Alex looked around at his companions, humans and aliens who had started as strangers and somehow become a team. They were battered, exhausted, and facing impossible odds, but none of them were backing down. Actually, Deep Current said, his skin showing patterns Alex had never seen before. You won't be doing it alone. Professor Wavemaker's voice came over the comm from whatever section of the ship she had ended up in. The Earth humans have shown us something important today. Perhaps it's time we learn from their example. 20 minutes later, the Star's Rest began to move. It wasn't graceful or elegant, more like watching a dying whale try to swim. But the massive ship was accelerating toward the pirate formation, using every functional thruster and the reaction mass from jettisoned cargo to build up momentum. Alex stood on the passenger ship's emergency bridge, coordinating with the Raider they had captured and the surviving Academy vessels. Around him, cadets from a dozen different species worked together to keep the dying ship operational long enough to complete its final mission. Pirate vessels are trying to change course, Sam reported from the pilot station. Too late, Alex said, watching the tactical display. They're too close together to maneuver effectively. The Star's Rest struck the pirate formation like a sledgehammer hitting glass. Ships that had seemed invincible minutes before were crushed or swept aside by the passenger liner's unstoppable mass. The formation dissolved into scattered wreckage and fleeing vessels. But the passenger ship was breaking apart under the stress of the collision. Hull plates were tearing loose and entire sections were spinning away into space. "All hands abandon ship," Alex announced. "This is really it this time." They made it to the escape pods with seconds to spare, launching into space just as the Star's Rest finally came apart in the expanding cloud of debris and liberated atmosphere. But this time rescue ships were already on the way, Academy vessels and emergency responders who had been waiting for the battle to end. As Alex was pulled aboard a rescue ship, he looked back at the wreckage field that had been the site of their desperate battle. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. The pirates were dead or scattered. The passengers were being rescued. And the Academy training fleet was limping home with casualties but no total losses. That was the most reckless, dangerous, and tactically unsound operation I have ever witnessed, Commandant Crystalsong said 3 days later, standing before the assembled cadets in the Academy's main auditorium. Her crystalline form caught the light from a dozen different angles, throwing rainbow patterns across the walls as she spoke. Around the auditorium, hundreds of cadets from every species in the galaxy sat in absolute silence, waiting to hear what would happen to the humans who had turned a routine rescue mission into something that would be talked about for generations. It was also, the Commandant continued, the most effective combat operation in this Academy's history. Alex sat between Sam and Reese in the front row, trying not to fidget under the weight of all those alien eyes. His left arm was still in a medical brace from injuries sustained during the boarding action, and Sam's face showed the fading marks of her fight in the Raiders' engine room. Reese looked the most intact of the three, but Alex knew she had worked for 20 straight hours treating casualties from the battle. "The official casualty report is as follows," Crystalsong said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the auditorium. "Academy personnel, 17 injured, none killed. Civilian passengers, all 300 rescued successfully. Enemy forces completely eliminated or dispersed." A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. Those numbers were impossible by any reasonable standard. Training vessels didn't defeat experienced pirates. Cadets didn't win battles against superior forces using nothing but escape pods and improvised tactics. But they had done exactly that. The methods employed during this operation violated numerous Academy regulations. The Commandant continued. Unauthorized abandonment of assigned vessels, destruction of Academy property, engagement with enemy forces without proper authorization, use of improvised weapons and tactics not covered by standard procedures. Alex felt his stomach sink. They had saved 300 lives and defeated a pirate fleet, but they were still going to be expelled for breaking rules. However, Crystalsong said, and her tone shifted to something Alex had never heard from her before. Results speak louder than regulations. The Earth-human cadets and their companions demonstrated capabilities that our standard assessments failed to detect. She moved closer to the front row, her faceted surface reflecting their images in fractured pieces. "We have spent months trying to understand what makes Earth-humans different from other species. We tested your intelligence, your physical capabilities, your psychological profiles. We found you adequate but unremarkable. What we failed to test," she continued, "was what you would do when everything went wrong. When the careful plans collapsed, when the elegant solutions failed, when survival required not following the rules but breaking them entirely." Around the auditorium, other cadets were leaning forward in their seats, hanging on every word. "The scanner at our entry gate warns visitors about Earth-origin species," Crystalsong said. "For months I believed this warning was about your potential for violence, your primitive nature, your inability to integrate with civilized society." She paused, and in that silence Alex could hear his own heartbeat. "I was wrong. The warning is not about what you might do to us. It is about what we might fail to recognize in you." Crystalsong turned to address the entire auditorium now, her voice growing stronger and more confident. "Earth is what we call a death world, a planet so hostile that most species would consider it uninhabitable. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predators, constant environmental challenges. We assumed that beings from such a world would be crude, violent, and unsuited for advanced civilization. What we failed to understand is that such a world produces beings who do not break under pressure, who do not freeze when faced with the impossible, who see obstacles not as reasons to surrender, but as problems to be solved. Alex felt something shifting in the room's atmosphere. The other cadets were looking at the three humans differently now, not with fear or disgust, but with something approaching awe. The Earth humans did not win yesterday's battle through superior technology or overwhelming force, Crystal Song continued. They won because they refused to accept that defeat was inevitable. They turned escape pods into weapons, wreckage into shields, and a dying passenger ship into the instrument of victory. She moved back to stand directly in front of Alex. Sam and Reese, this is what the scanner was trying to tell us. Earth origin species are dangerous, not because they are violent or primitive, but because they are unpredictable. They do not follow our assumptions about what is possible or impossible. They look at our certainties and ask, but what if? The Commandant's form began to shift, her crystalline structure rearranging itself into new patterns that caught and reflected light in ways Alex had never seen before. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like watching a living prism reshape itself according to pure mathematics. Effective immediately, the Earth human cadets are transferred from remedial housing to advanced quarters. Their equipment will be upgraded to academy standard. Their academic classifications are changed from provisional to full cadet status. Applause began somewhere in the back of the auditorium, a sound like wind chimes mixed with clicking and buzzing as different species showed approval in their own ways. It spread through the room until the entire space was filled with alien sounds of appreciation. But Crystal Song wasn't finished. Additionally, she said, waiting for quiet, new courses will be added to the academy curriculum. Adaptive problem solving, non-standard tactics, crisis leadership. These courses will be taught by the Earth human cadets who have demonstrated practical expertise in areas where our traditional education has proven inadequate. Alex felt his jaw drop. They were going from outcasts to instructors in the span of a single speech. Finally, the Commandant said, I am authorized to announce that the Galactic Defense Council has approved a new initiative, the Integrated Species Combat Program. This program will pair cadets from different worlds and backgrounds, combining their unique capabilities into more effective teams. She gestured toward the mixed group of cadets who had participated in the rescue mission. The success of yesterday's operation proves that diversity of approach is not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be cultivated. As the ceremony concluded and cadets began filing out of the auditorium, Alex found himself surrounded by beings who wanted to talk to him, work with him, learn from him. The change was overwhelming. Weeks of isolation and discrimination had been replaced overnight by acceptance and respect. How does it feel to be famous? Steelmind asked, his metallic form gleaming in the auditorium's lights. Weird, Alex admitted. A few days ago, everyone thought we were dangerous primitives. You are dangerous primitives, Deep Current said, his skin showing patterns of amusement. That's what makes you valuable. Over the following weeks, Alex watched as the academy transformed around them. The rigid hierarchies that had separated different species began to blur as cadets found themselves working with partners they never would have considered before. Traditional courses were supplemented with new approaches that emphasized adaptability over elegance, effectiveness over appearance. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some instructors complained that standards were being lowered. Some cadets from more advanced species grumbled about having to learn primitive techniques. But the results spoke for themselves. Mixed teams consistently outperformed single-species groups in simulations and exercises. Alex found himself teaching engineering courses that focused on making things work under impossible conditions. Sam taught piloting techniques that emphasized intuition and adaptation over programmed responses. Reese developed medical protocols for treating injuries that energy healing couldn't handle. More importantly, they were learning as much as they were teaching. Working with beings from dozens of different worlds, Alex discovered approaches to problems that human thinking never would have found. The crystalline mathematics of the Keth, the flow dynamics of the Moor, the collective processing of the hive minds. All of these offered insights that made human solutions more effective. 6 months after the rescue mission, Alex stood at the viewport of his new quarters in the advanced cadet section, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow was graduation day, and he would receive his commission as an engineering officer in the Galactic Defense Force. Sam knocked on his door, carrying 2 cups of something that actually tasted like coffee, one of the perks of their new status. "Ready for tomorrow?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his desk. "I think so," Alex said. "You?" "I'm looking forward to it. My first assignment is with the Rapid Response Squadron, mixed crews handling emergency situations across the galaxy." "And Reese?" "Combat Medical Training Division. She's going to teach other species how to handle trauma situations that their traditional methods can't solve." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships move between the Academy's docking arms like fireflies in the darkness. "Do you think we've really changed things?" Sam asked. Alex thought about everything that had happened since their arrival. The scanner at the entry gate still blared its warning about Earth origin species, but the message had been updated. Now it read, "Earth origin species detected. Approach with respect." "We've shown them that there are different ways to be strong," he said. "Different ways to solve problems. Different ways to survive when everything goes wrong. And they're listening? Some of them. The ones who matter." Sam raised her coffee cup in a mock toast to being dangerous primitives. Alex clinked his cup against hers. To proving that primitive doesn't mean helpless. The next morning, graduation proceeded with all the ceremony and tradition that the Academy could muster. Cadets from across the galaxy received their commissions and prepared to take their places in the vast machinery of galactic civilization. When Alex's name was called, he walked across the stage to receive his insignia from Commandant Crystalsong herself. As she pinned the engineering officer's symbol to his uniform, she spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. "The galaxy is vast and full of challenges we have not yet imagined," she said. "I believe your species will help us face whatever comes." "We'll do our best," Alex replied. "That," she said, "is exactly what I'm counting on." As the ceremony concluded and the new officers began dispersing to their assignments throughout the galaxy, Alex looked back at the scanner that had marked their arrival so many months ago. The red warning lights were flashing as new cadets arrived, but now he understood what the warning really meant. It wasn't telling the galaxy to be afraid of humans. It was telling the galaxy to be ready for them, ready for beings who looked at impossible situations and asked, "How do we make this work?" Ready for species who had learned to survive by being too stubborn to quit and too creative to fail. Ready for the children of Earth, who carried within them the accumulated wisdom of a world that had never made anything easy. The scanner's warning echoed through the docking bay as Alex walked away. "Earth origin species detected. Approach with respect," he smiled. Finally, someone was listening.